All right, so now let's have a look at smooth muscle. And what we're looking at here is the zoomed out view. So we've got the scanning lens view, and we can see these cells that are kind of pinkish. When we zoom on them, we'll see that they're quite tapered and they have these nuclei that are purple. Now in this particular case, we're looking in the stomach. And if we sort of move around, we'll see that there are other tissues in the slide that are not smooth muscle. So for example, up here at the edges, we'll see some cells that, if you look closely, would turn out to be simple columnar. But we're going to focus at this point on the smooth muscle. And we've got a situation where in the stomach, and indeed in all the intestines, we'll see that we have several layers of smooth muscle. And they're arranged perpendicularly to each other, typically, because one is going to be circumferentially arranged around the organ and the other will be longitudinal. We see in the stomach, we actually have an extra layer that is oblique. So depending on which part of this smooth muscle we zoom into, we can see it in longitudinal section. We might see it in transverse section where the cells are coming out of the plane towards you. So I'm going to try and look at it in longitudinal section here. So the first thing I'm going to do is switch my microscope to the low power objective here. I'm going to refocus, of course. Takes a little longer with these microscopes, but that's okay. And here we can see some very nice examples of some smooth muscle. And these look cut pretty much transversely, possibly obliquely, but in any case, you can see very nicely sort of the morphology of the cells. And you can see that they have this sort of tapered appearance, and they're pink, and they've got this tapered appearance, and right smack in the middle, we've got these purple nuclei. Now, sometimes these cells don't stain as nicely as these. This is actually a very good example. And here you could see a bunch of smooth muscle cells with their nuclei that are stained. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom into our high power objective. Give it a little refocus here, and voila, there they are, nicely in focus. And I have magnified this a little bit on the screen so we can see a little bit better here. And we can see these sort of tapered cells with these nuclei. Most of them, you can see the nuclei within them. You can see the cytoplasm that surrounds the nuclei, and of course you can sort of make out these cell membranes as well. So you can see the cell membrane. That would be the border around this thing. So this is our smooth muscle, and we find this lining hollow organs, or I should say surrounding hollow organs. The epithelium lines the hollow organs, but outside the epithelium and the connective tissue to which it is anchored, we have this layers of smooth muscle. And in most digestive organs, it's 2 layers. In the stomach, it's going to be 3 layers. And we're going to see that they're arranged longitudinally and circumferentially around the organ. And once again, you can see very nicely these big purple cell nuclei here. You can see the cytoplasm that surrounds it, and then you can make out the cell membrane again. And these are long tapered cells. Now, one of the things that people sometimes have difficulty with, and I'll give you a little heads up on it now, is some people will mix this up with dense fibrous connective tissue, simply because the nuclei somewhat resemble the cell nuclei of the fibroblasts in the dense fibrous regular connective tissue. However, in this case, you can see very nicely the tapered cells themselves, and you can actually see the nuclei, and they have this sort of oval shape, and you can actually see sort of inclusions in the nucleus. So you see these inclusions that are not otherwise present when we look at dense fibrous connective tissue. So the smooth muscle is going to distinguish itself, for one, by the shape of the nuclei. They're not as long, and the cells have this very tapered appearance. And so these cells, this is actually cells now. This is not some kind of connective tissue, whereas when we looked at the connective tissue, the pink things are much longer, and they're collagen bundles, and the purple things that are included in between them are going to be the nuclei of the fibroblasts. In this case, you can see this is smooth muscle because the nuclei are inside the cells, and they're a bit different shape. They're not quite as elongated. And you can also see a little bit of the cell border here. So that is our smooth muscle. We could probably take a little tour around here, look at some other instances of it so we can see smooth muscle. I might be able to find some. Here's a really good example in longitudinal section here. You can see very nicely the nuclei. You can see the length of the cells. And perhaps I could find one where they're coming more out of the plane towards you. if I keep looking around, this looks kind of obliquely sliced here. These are coming out of the plane towards you. You can see that it's hard to see the tapered shape of the cell now, and the nuclei look more round because you're cutting them in cross section. Typically, when we look at this in this lab, we're going to be looking more in the longitudinal section. So we're going to be seeing cells that look more like this. So this here is a very good example of our smooth muscle tissue.